Hello, covering how Japanese securities firms are slapping American claims. Huawei's Ascend chips produce 700,000 units a year. Huawei has created a computing power nuke with their AI chip system, and even NVIDIA has to learn from them. China and the US are in an AI tech war. The US government stance is mixed. While they're cracking down on Huawei, they also say Huawei is already restricted. Bloomberg reports a US Commerce Department official said this. On June 12, during his testimony before the US Congress, Kessler said that this year, Huawei can produce at most 200,000 units of the Ascend series AI chips, and the vast majority of these will be supplied to the domestic market in China. Kessler emphasized that, for the US, we might develop a false sense of security, and we must clearly recognize that China is catching up quickly. Although I currently predict that the production volume of advanced chips is relatively low, we can't let our guard down because of this, because I know China's goal is the global market. According to data from the market research firm Techinsights, in 2014, the size of China's AI chip market was about 1.5 million units. At the same time, Huawei and other domestic smartphone manufacturers may need tens of millions of high-end mobile phone chips for their smartphones. On June 11, China-US trade negotiation representatives concluded their economic and trade consultations in London. Some US officials hinted there might be a relaxation of export restrictions on AI chip design software to China. However, I reckon the US won't loosen up. Because, right? The export of H13 chips has already started. When asked about the details of the negotiations, he said he attended part of the talks, but refused to disclose any further details. However, Kessler reckons, Huawei can only produce up to 200,000 Ascend AI chips at most? That number is quite different from what the market estimates. Japanese semiconductor analyst Huajia said in a recent research report that Huawei's Ascend 910 series AI chips. This year's shipment volume is expected to exceed 700,000 units. The Ascend 910 has three types of chips, A, B, and C series. The report says that Huawei's latest mass-produced Ascend 910C chip marks a deep six moment for China's semiconductor industry. This chip is made up of two 910B chips combined, and its performance is considered to be on par with NVIDIA's H18 chip, far surpassing the previously supplied China-exclusive X10 chip. There is no winter break for AI products. The hope is that the US AI industry sees abandoning the Chinese market as a suicidal move. In response, CEO Jensen Huang is worried that all of China's business will eventually be taken by Huawei. Recently, when asked about Huawei's chip technology, he said that Huawei is undoubtedly one of the most powerful tech companies in the world. Their computing technology, network tech, and software capabilities are incredibly strong. They have all the necessary abilities to drive AI development. On the other hand, Huawei's founder Ren Zhengfei is actually quite humble in his words. On June 10, in a front-page interview with People's Daily, he said, when asked about the Ascend chip being warned by the US for potential usage risks, and what impact that would have on Huawei, Ren Zhengfei said that there are actually many Chinese chip companies doing a great job. Huawei is just one of them. The US is exaggerating Huawei's achievements. Huawei is not that impressive. We have to work hard just to keep up. According to the US, our individual chips are still a generation behind theirs. I need to rely on mathematics, physics, Moore's law, and group computing to make up for the gap in single-chip performance. In the end, we can still achieve practical results. The Mainland Observer Network and reputable public accounts have published articles saying that Huawei has launched a computing power nuke and revealed the secret to surpassing NVIDIA, all while the US continues to ramp up sanctions against China. Huawei's Ascend 384 Supernote system has made a stunning debut. On the 16th, Huawei held the Hemi Cloud AI Summit. Besides launching the new Ascend 90C AI chip, Huawei Cloud's vice president, Huang Jin, also made an appearance. According to the introduction, the brand-new Generation 384 Supernote system combines 384 Ascend 910C chips into a single system, emphasizing that this technology will become a key driving force in the AI era. Huawei's launch of the 384 system is seen as custom building a computing power nuclear bomb for the AI chip deep learning moment. When Huawei's single-chip capabilities are still a generation behind NVIDIA, they have shifted towards system-level innovation. In terms of key performance indicators, Their system outperforms NVIDIA's NPL 710 system, which combines 72 chips. The system's efficiency is high, reaching 67%, and its overall capacity exceeds 3 times that of the competition. Huawei's biggest innovation is breaking away from the competition focused on single-card, single-chip computing power. By driving collaborative innovation across computing, storage, networking, and architecture, they overcome the limitations of hardware and chip manufacturing processes and maximize the potential of both their chips and systems. Is China's securities industry building a comprehensive alternative to NVIDIA? This is exactly what Huang Rinxuan is most worried about. Not only could it cause NVIDIA to suffer permanent losses in China, but it might even shake the very foundation of the so-called chip empire. What's even more interesting now is how they plan to use supernodes to surpass NVIDIA, even without access to advanced chip supplies. Under the heavy sanctions against Huawei, their technical team has actually managed to obtain chip manufacturing processes and produce their own chips, building a supernode and cluster system. This computing power solution can continuously meet extremely high computational demands in the long run. Strictly speaking, the concept of supernodes isn't really something new. Even a giant like NVIDIA has been exploring this for quite some time. The rise of this technology actually came about when transformer-based large neural network models emerged, which brought about huge demands for model training capabilities. At the same time, the demand for video memory has exploded, to the point where a single AI chip GPU, or even a single server, can hardly handle it. When you meet such high computing power, that's when you have to build a large number of high-speed computing chips, and efficiently unify them into a single structure. That's what a supernode is. Compared to traditional computing clusters, supernodes not only stack up the computing power of a huge number of GPUs. It's also about whether you can build ultra-high-speed interconnections between GPUs to reduce and balance the overhead of computation. By integrating a large number of GPUs into one system, you can provide massive and efficient AI computing power so they can work together to handle both training and inference tasks. Last March, they launched the GB200NLV710 dual supernode system, which connects 36 Grace CPU's central processing units via external high-speed dedicated lines, tightly integrated with the latest Blackwell GPUs from NVIDIA. This forms a logically massive GPU, boosting the inference speed of trillion-parameter large models by 30 times. In fact, quite a few companies in China have also been exploring supernode technology, like Baidu and Kunlunxin, who have been continuously building their own supernodes. But at present, when it comes to supernodes built entirely with domestically produced chips, and that can fully surpass NVIDIA's NVL7 systems, only Huawei has managed to achieve this. Under intense pressure, Huawei developed the COW Nature 384. Compared to NVIDIA's solution, is Huawei only able to surpass them by simply stacking more cards? Why is that? And why don't other companies just stack more cards as well? When it comes to the massive throughput demands brought by training large models, this becomes a key question. The traditional solution is to stack as many AI accelerator cards as possible and build larger compute clusters, but unlimited stacking doesn't necessarily bring a linear increase in performance. In fact, it can cause issues within the compute cluster itself. The GPUs and the interconnects between them can't communicate efficiently. As a result, some GPUs end up idle because there isn't enough data for them to process, which leads to a situation where 1 + 1 is less than 2. Over the past 8 years, the raw computing power of a single AI accelerator card has increased by 40 times, but the bandwidth of the system's internal bus has only grown 9 times, and the cross-node network bandwidth has increased by just 4 times. This makes cluster network communication the biggest challenge in current large model training and inference. So, if communication efficiency can't be improved, simply stacking 384 ASCEND cards together doesn't necessarily perform better than 72 NVIDIA cards, because of the communication overhead between the cards and between the servers. It could offset the gains from increased computing power, causing the effective computing power to actually decrease instead of going up. Under this trend, the real value of NVLink is that it builds an ultra-wide channel between GPUs. But the key point is that there are still some hardware bottlenecks inside. In massive computing, there are also some bandwidth bottlenecks. Compared to NVIDIA's patchwork improvements, the first feature of the ASCEND call matrix 384 system stands out. It chooses to completely overhaul the traditional computing architecture. The core is to break away from the traditional CPU-centric master-slave architecture and innovatively propose a fully peer-to-peer architecture, removing many relay nodes. This enables true point-to-point interconnection between GPUs, resulting in much higher computing density and interconnection bandwidths. The second feature of the Shenglan Level 384 system is the use of optical communication technology to greatly improve communication efficiency. In the 384 system, a total of 3,168 optical fibers and 6,912 400G optical modules are used. In contrast, the MBL7 and 2 supernodes still use traditional wired architectures. Although the cost and power consumption are relatively low, once deployed, it stays in a fixed state and is relatively stable. The downside is that it can only be deployed within 2 meters. Otherwise, the communication speed will drop significantly, so the number of chips that can be connected is also limited. On the other hand, a SENS optical module offers high bandwidth and speed with low loss, making it suitable for long-distance transmission. This means it can connect to more chips and allows for flexible deployment. However, optical communication uses fibers, which are fragile and have a higher failure rate. If the connector isn't plugged in properly, the fiber is bent, or the connector is dirty. Even a small issue can cause disconnection. Even though NVIDIA considered using optical modules to connect 256 H100 chips back in 2022, after evaluating costs, they ultimately decided not to go ahead. It's because optical communication technology is just too difficult to handle. But what about Huawei? For this communications giant, they're already experts in optical communication modules. They've mastered it. With years of leading optical communication technology, applying it to supernode communication gives them a unique edge. After the 340-node system made its debut, it attracted a lot of attention overseas.
CloudMatrix 384's debut sparked global buzz. SemiAnalysis reported that while Huawei's chips lag by a generation, its scaling solution is a generation ahead of NVIDIA and AMD's current offerings. CloudMatrix 384 competes directly with NVL72, surpassing it in some metrics with engineering strengths in networking, optical communication, and software. Even Huang admitted Huawei's lead. Technically, CloudMatrix 384 outperforms NVIDIA's cutting-edge solutions. We must take Huawei seriously, a formidable company, and go all out.
Huawei has made it clear they demand 5G and AI technology, right? This report is very forward-looking and aligns with the current strategic direction, because they are also pushing forward with synchronized plans on a large scale and must speed up the pace. To sum it up, first, if you try to suppress China, China will just come up with something new. For example, if you stop Huawei from buying 5G chips from Samsung or TSMC, Huawei not only manages to make its own 5G chips with similar performance, they even produced 3 generations of smartphones. Meanwhile, their competitor Apple still hasn't managed to catch up. Second, if you ban the sale of high-end AI chips, Huawei in China not only developed the Ascend 90C chip with almost the same performance, they even created the CloudMatrix 384 supercomputing system, combining 384 910C chips into one system, a computational nuke. The more the US tries to suppress China, the stronger China becomes. So what's the point? They can't achieve the effect of suppressing China. What they're really achieving is just reducing their own business.